No man will ever touch you. Evan didn't spit the words. He placed them carefully, like he wanted them to last. We were sitting at the dining table. Plates still half full. The TV muted in the background. No phones. No escape routes. Just his voice and the way everyone waited to see how I'd react. You know why, right? He continued, almost conversational. Because you're basically a lesbian. Or whatever you are. Men can smell that kind of thing. I felt the heat crawl up my neck, but my voice stayed level. Don't talk about my body. Or my sexuality. He tilted his head, studying me. See? That tone. That's why no one wants you. You're not even real family. You're just extra. The word extra hit harder than the rest. My mother didn't ask him to stop. She didn't even look at me. Instead, she stood up so fast her chair slammed back. The slap came before I saw her hand. It wasn't loud. It was heavy. The kind that knocks the air sideways. My vision flickered. The room shifted like it had slipped an inch off its axis. I tasted something bitter and coppery and realized my teeth had clicked together too hard. Why do you push him? My mother snapped. Her voice was shaking, not with guilt, but rage. Why do you always provoke? I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stood there, stunned by how quickly the narrative settled. Evan leaned back, arms crossed. Watching. The silence stretched until my father cleared his throat. If you knew your place, Thomas said, not meeting my eyes, this wouldn't keep happening. That was the sentence that stayed with me. Your place. Not are you okay? Not that went too far. Just placement. Rank. Order. I am Rachel Monroe. I was 31 years old in that room. I paid my own bills. I handled emergencies. I showed up. And in that house, my value could be erased with one sentence and one hand. What shocked me wasn't the slap. It was how rehearsed everyone felt afterward. My mother turned to Evan instantly, softening. He didn't mean it like that, she said, to him. You know how she is, she added. I looked at Evan then. Really looked. There was no anger on his face. Just certainty. That's when it hit me. This wasn't an argument. It was a reminder. A reminder of who could speak. And who could be corrected. I walked away without another word. No one followed. No one asked where I was going. The house settled back into its rhythm like nothing had happened. In my room, my hands finally started shaking. And with them came a realization that felt worse than the sting on my cheek. This wasn't the first time they'd done this to me. It was just the first time Evan said it out loud. I didn't wake up one day as the family problem. I was trained into it, slowly, in ways that were easy to deny later. When I think back, the pattern shows up early. Evan cried, and the room rearranged itself around him. I stayed quiet, and the room forgot I was there. If something broke, I must have touched it last. If something went wrong, I must have misunderstood instructions. I learned quickly that explanations only made things worse. Money followed the same rules. Evan's wants were treated like investments. New shoes because he grew. New phone because he needed confidence. Gas money because he was busy. My needs were framed as inconveniences. I worked part-time in high school, not because we couldn't afford things, but because it was good for me. When Evan needed cash, it was help. When I did, it was dependence. Chores weren't divided. They were assigned. I cleaned because I was better at it. I cooked because I was already in the kitchen. I remembered birthdays, appointments, deadlines. When something slipped through, it was still my fault, for not reminding hard enough. Evan forgot things all the time. That forgetfulness was treated like charm. My mother used to say it casually, almost proudly. Evan was her future. I was strong, which meant I could handle less. Strong meant flexible. Flexible meant quiet. Somewhere along the way, being useful became safer than being seen. My father watched most of this without comment. He wasn't cruel. He just wasn't present in the moments that mattered. Silence has weight when it shows up consistently. It taught me that fairness wasn't coming from that direction. So I adjusted. I learned how to anticipate moods. How to soften statements. How to give ground before anyone asked. Being agreeable kept the temperature down. Being invisible kept me out of trouble. I didn't resent Evan back then. I resented myself for needing less, wanting less, expecting less. There's a strange comfort in being the one who adjusts. You feel essential without ever being valued. You're trusted with responsibility but excluded from authority. Safe enough to lean on. Never important enough to protect. As an adult, people sometimes describe me as calm under pressure. They don't see where that skill came from. They don't see the years of learning that reacting was dangerous, and silence was currency. After what Evan said at the table, those memories lined up differently. Not like random childhood moments, but like steps in a system that worked exactly as designed. One moment in particular surfaced, sharp and specific. Something my mother said years ago, in passing, that I'd laughed off at the time. Now, it didn't sound accidental at all. Evan had mastered two versions of himself. In public, he was charming. Loud laugh. Easy smile. The kind of son relatives praised without being asked. At family dinners, he pulled out chairs for guests, told stories about his plans, his future, his potential. People leaned toward him when he spoke. I existed on the edge of those conversations, close enough to hear, far enough to be forgotten. In private, Evan sharpened his voice. It started with comments that were easy to dismiss if someone wanted to dismiss them. "Relax," he'd say when I frowned. "You're too uptight." No wonder. He wouldn't finish the sentence. He never needed to. Sometimes he did. "Who'd want you like this?" he muttered once, glancing at my clothes with exaggerated disappointment. "Try harder." He said it casually, as if commenting on the weather. As if it were advice. I froze. Not because the words were new, but because they landed exactly where he aimed them. Evan didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He smiled while he spoke, like he was doing me a favor by being honest. When I looked toward my father, hoping, just once, that someone would interrupt, the response came before I even spoke. "He's just joking," my father used to say, not looking up. "Don't take everything so seriously." Joking. I learned quickly that jokes were weapons you weren't allowed to bleed from. Evan noticed my silence. He always did. And he used it. The comments became more precise. More public. Just enough to humiliate me, never enough to cause a scene. At a gathering, he laughed and said, "She's picky. That's why she's still alone." People chuckled awkwardly. Someone changed the subject. I felt my face heat up, but stayed quiet. That's when I realized something that unsettled me more than the insults. Evan wasn't brave. He was strategic. He chose moments when speaking back would make me look dramatic. He relied on the family's comfort with my silence. He counted on the pattern, "I absorb, Evan speaks." And it worked, because it always had. But then something small broke the rhythm. One afternoon, I was sorting old files in the study. Nothing important. Just papers no one wanted to deal with. As usual. I noticed my name. Then his. Forms. Access letters. A document stamped and signed months ago, using my ID number, my signature style, but not my handwriting. An account linked to my name. Authority I didn't remember giving. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with clarity. This wasn't about jokes. Or ego. Or teasing. This was leverage. Evan didn't just benefit from my silence. He operated inside it. I thought of all the times I have been asked to just sign here. All the moments I have trusted because questioning had always cost her more than compliance. For the first time, I didn't confront him. Didn't argue. Didn't explain. I put the papers back exactly where they were. And walked away. That night, Evan made another comment. Sharp, familiar, meant to cut. I didn't react. I watched his face instead. The slight pause. The flicker of confusion. He noticed. And I understood something important. My silence had always protected him. Now, it would protect me, while I observed everything. The clinic smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. I arrived 10 minutes early, like I always did, because being late felt dangerous. Because waiting rooms had taught me that time was something I had to earn the right to use. I checked in quietly, handed over my insurance card, apologized twice even though no one had accused me of anything. The receptionist nodded, already tired. "Have a seat. They're running behind." Saturday. I noticed the usual things first. The flickering screen looping health reminders, the child coughing too loudly, the woman arguing on the phone about coverage. Everyone here looked like they were carrying something invisible but heavy. When my name was called, I flinched, then stood quickly, smoothing my clothes out of habit. Dr. Alvarez didn't rush. That alone felt strange. He glanced at my chart, then at my face, not like he was searching for a problem, but like he was listening before I spoke. "How long have you been feeling this exhausted?" he asked. I opened my mouth to minimize it. To say it's nothing. To say I'm fine. The words were lined up and ready, but something about the room stopped me. The door was closed. The tone was neutral. There was no audience. "I don't know," I said instead. "A while." He nodded. Didn't challenge my answer. Didn't ask why I'd waited so long. During the exam, his hand paused briefly near my arm. "Does this hurt?" he asked. I followed his gaze and noticed the faint bruise I'd stopped seeing days ago. Not dramatic. Not fresh. Just there. "Yes," I said, surprised by how easily it came out. He didn't ask how it happened. Didn't assume. Didn't doubt. "All right," he said simply, making a note. "Thank you for telling me." "Thank you." The words landed harder than I expected. As he went through my symptoms, he explained things plainly: how stress compounds, how sleep debt accumulates, how bodies carry more than people realize. He talked about delayed care like it was normal, not negligent. "A lot of people wait," he said. "Insurance approvals, work schedules, family responsibilities. It adds up." I felt something loosen in my chest. Here, my exhaustion wasn't a flaw. My delay wasn't a failure. My body wasn't an inconvenience. When I mentioned the appointment had taken weeks to schedule, he smiled ruefully. "Unfortunately, that's the system," he said. "You did the right thing by coming when you could." No one had ever framed it that way before. When the visit ended, he reviewed next steps, tests, follow-ups, options, without pressure. Then, almost as an afterthought, he looked back at my chart. "By the way," he said casually, "based on what I'm seeing here, you qualify for something you might not know about." I blinked. "For what?" He turned the screen slightly toward me, and for the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel like something already decided without me. I didn't announce the boundary. I didn't give a speech or frame it as a stand. I just made one small change and waited to see who noticed. I stopped rearranging my schedule around Evan's needs. Not dramatically. Not loudly. I just said no once, politely, when he asked me to handle something that wasn't mine. I had an appointment. I had already planned my day. The room went quiet in a way that wasn't normal. My mother looked up first. "You're being difficult lately," she said, like it was an observation, not an accusation. "I'm just busy," I replied. My voice stayed even. I didn't explain further. That was enough to trigger the shift. The requests didn't stop, they multiplied. Errands came with urgency now. Favors were framed as emergencies. If I hesitated, the language changed. "You're dramatic. You always take things the wrong way. No one said you had to do it. Why are you acting like a victim?" Each sentence was soft on the surface. Reasonable. Designed to make me question my own memory. Evan adjusted faster than anyone. He didn't yell. He smirked. "You've changed," he said one evening, leaning against the counter like he owned the space. "Trying to prove something." I met his eyes briefly. Didn't take the bait. "I'm just handling my responsibilities," I said. He laughed under his breath. "Sure you are." After that, he made a point of reminding me, subtly, where I stood. Jokes delivered in front of others. Comments about how sensitive I'd become. How unstable stress can make people. My father didn't intervene. He never did. "This family has bigger problems than moods," he said once, dismissively. "Don't create drama where there isn't any." So I stopped talking. And I started paying attention. It was small at first. A document I hadn't authorized being referenced like it was common knowledge. An email sent from an account that wasn't his, but used his phrasing. A conversation repeated back to me, slightly altered, with just enough distortion to make me sound unreliable. Then I saw it. A file. My name attached to decisions I hadn't made. Requests logged as if they'd come from me. A narrative forming quietly, efficiently, without my participation. Not sloppy. Intentional. I felt something cold settle in. This wasn't about feelings. This was about control. And suddenly, his earlier comments made sense, not as insults, but as groundwork. If my credibility could be softened, questioned, laughed at, then facts wouldn't matter later. I didn't confront him. I didn't warn anyone. I took screenshots, saved timestamps, forwarded copies to myself. I wrote dates down in a notebook I kept hidden in my bag. No commentary, no emotion, just records. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. I didn't go looking for justice. I went looking for clarity. Ms. Jennings' office was quiet in the way professional spaces are, neutral walls, clean desk, no personal photos that invite emotional conversation. She didn't ask why I was there in a dramatic way. She asked it like someone who expected facts. "How can I help you today, Rachel?" I told her I needed to understand something. Not accuse. Not complain. Just understand. She listened without interrupting. That mattered more than her words. When I finished, she didn't react immediately. She opened a file. Typed a few things. Checked dates. Then she looked up. "What you're describing isn't hypothetical," she said calmly. "There are records that support this." My chest tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "What kind of records?" She explained it the way professionals do, carefully, without blame. How access works. How authorizations leave trails. How changes made under someone's name don't disappear just because intentions were unclear. "This affects more than feelings," she said. "It affects credibility." She didn't dramatize it. That was worse. She told me how credit histories don't just reflect money, they reflect trust. How employment files quietly follow people. How informal narratives, once logged, can shape decisions without anyone ever saying my name out loud. "Reputation damage is often subtle," she said. "By the time people notice it, it's already done its work." I asked one question. "Is it fixable?" She paused. "Some of it," she said. "If addressed early. Quietly." Quietly. That word stayed with me. She outlined options, not instructions, not pressure. Just systems. Processes. What documentation could do. What silence would allow. "You're not obligated to escalate," she said. "But you should know that not acting is also a choice." I nodded. When I stood to leave, she added something she hadn't put in the file. "People assume calm means nothing is wrong," she said. "In systems like these, calm just means you're paying attention." I walked out into the hallway and stood there longer than necessary. The truth was clearer now. Measurable. Traceable. No longer something I could explain away as family tension or misunderstanding. This wasn't emotional harm. It was structural. I had a decision to make. Stay quiet, and let the version of me they were building become official. Or act, without noise, without confrontation, and let facts speak where I had stopped trying to. I didn't decide right away. But for the first time, silence felt like something I was choosing, not something imposed on me. I didn't announce that I was leaving. There was no packed car moment, no slammed door, no speech anyone could later quote back to me as proof I was unstable. I moved the way I had learned to live in that house. Quietly, efficiently, without asking permission. One box at a time. Documents first. Then clothes I actually wore. Then the things no one noticed unless they were gone. I signed a short-term lease across town. Nothing symbolic. Just practical. Close enough to work. Far enough to breathe. The day I stopped sleeping there, no one commented. Not my mother. Not my father. Not Evan. I still came by for a few days. Still answered texts. Still handled what I always handled. That was the trick. My absence wasn't dramatic enough to register yet. People don't notice the floor holding them up. They notice the fall. The first crack came quietly. A utility bill went unpaid. Not because no one had money, but because no one remembered the due date. Then a medical form sat untouched on the counter because no one knew which section mattered. A school-related deadline Evan had mocked for years suddenly became urgent when no one else filled it out. I heard about these things secondhand. Complaints phrased as confusion. "Didn't this used to just happen?" My mother said once, more annoyed than concerned. I didn't answer. Evan texted a question he could have solved himself if he'd ever needed to. My father asked where a file was kept, the one I'd organized every year. I told him the truth. It's where it's always been. But it wasn't enough anymore. Because where it's always been required someone who knew how to look. That's when the tone shifted. Not panic. Not yet. Just irritation. The kind that comes when a system fails and everyone assumes someone else broke it. They didn't say my name in those conversations. That part came later. What they noticed first was friction. Time wasted. Mistakes that cost small amounts of money. Embarrassing phone calls. Missed confirmations. Overlapping appointments. Nothing dramatic. Just inefficient. I watched it from a distance, the way you watch a machine grind when one piece has been removed. No explosions. Just noise. The moment I understood it was working wasn't when they reached out to me. It was when something broke that couldn't be blamed on attitude or tone or overreacting. A concrete thing. A deadline. A consequence. And for the first time, there was no one left in the house who could quietly fix it before anyone noticed. I wasn't there when it started to fall apart. That mattered more than anything. Because when systems fail in that house, the first reflex was always the same: look for me. This time, there was no one to look at. Evan was forced into the space I used to occupy without being acknowledged. Phone calls. Emails. Forms. Deadlines. He approached them with the same confidence he used on everything else, until confidence met reality. He missed a call because he didn't recognize the number. He ignored an email because it looked unimportant. He signed something without reading the second page. When the problem surfaced, it was already late. My mother went into motion the way she always did when control slipped, not with solutions, but with panic. Her voice sharpened. Her movements sped up. She repeated the same instructions louder, as if volume could replace clarity. Did you handle it? Why would you assume that? You said you would. Evan snapped back, defensive and irritated. He blamed the system. The timing. The wording. Anyone but himself. My father tried to step in and realized he didn't know how. He didn't know the account details. Didn't know which documents mattered. Didn't know who usually spoke to whom. He stood in the doorway, quiet, overwhelmed, asking questions no one could answer quickly. That's when the blame game stalled. They circled each other, frustrated, voices overlapping, and then the pause. The moment where someone usually said my name. It didn't come. Because blaming me would have required admitting I wasn't there. The problem itself was simple, but the consequences weren't. A missed verification. A delayed response. Something that triggered an automated process no one could undo with charm or excuses. Penalties attached. Records updated. A note added where one hadn't existed before. Evan tried to laugh it off at first. Then he got louder. Then quieter. My mother made phone calls that didn't go the way she expected. She wasn't used to being told no by systems that didn't recognize urgency in her voice. My father sat at the table with papers spread out in front of him, realizing, too late, that none of this had ever been easy. It had only been invisible. No one said my name, but I felt it hovering in the room like a withheld accusation. The difference this time was simple. The problem had timestamps. External records. Third-party confirmation. It existed whether I spoke or not. And for the first time, there was a consequence moving forward that couldn't be softened by denial, jokes, or rewriting the story. Something official had begun. Something with momentum. Something that didn't care who the family usually blamed. He reached out 3 days later. Not dramatically. Not with anger. That's how I knew something had shifted. The message was short. Neutral. Almost polite. He asked if I was busy, said there was something small he needed to clarify. No insults. No jokes. No superiority layered between the lines. That alone told me more than the words did. I waited before responding, not to punish him, but because I no longer lived on immediate reaction. When I replied, it was calm. One sentence. No emotion attached. I asked what he needed. His answer came too fast. He started explaining things I hadn't asked about. Details. Justifications. He mentioned paperwork. A misunderstanding. A system error. He said my name more times in one paragraph than he had in the last year combined. There was something new in his tone. Care. Not the sincere kind, the strategic kind. I listened on the phone later that evening, letting silence do the work I used to rush to fill. He talked in circles, careful not to accuse me directly, careful not to admit fault either. He asked questions disguised as statements. He tested how much I knew without directly asking. I gave him nothing extra. Short answers. Clarifying questions. No reassurance. That's when his voice shifted again. He paused mid-sentence, lowered his volume, asked, almost casually, if I'd seen certain documents, if I remembered handling a specific account, if I still had access to an email he'd never acknowledged existed. That was the moment. He wasn't asking for help. He was measuring risk. I realized then that Evan had finally understood something important. My silence hadn't been ignorance. It had been observation. And whatever he thought I knew, he suspected it wasn't the full picture. I told him I didn't have anything to add beyond what I'd already said. That if someone needed clarification, they should contact the appropriate office. The same advice I'd been giving quietly for years, now returned without cushioning. He went quiet. Not angry. Not mocking. Uneasy. Before hanging up, he said my name once more, carefully, as if trying to place it back where it used to sit, beneath him. It didn't land. After the call ended, I didn't feel relief or victory. Just clarity. The kind that comes when roles finally collapse under their own weight. Official consequences were already moving. Notices don't announce themselves loudly at first. They arrive calmly. Logged. Time-stamped. Unimpressed by excuses. Evan felt them approaching. And for the first time, he knew he wasn't the one controlling the narrative anymore. Consequences didn't arrive loudly. They never do. They came as letters with neutral language. Emails written in careful tone. Calendar invitations that didn't include emotion, only facts. Someone asked for clarification. Someone else asked for records. A system flagged an inconsistency that could no longer be smoothed over with confidence or charm. At home, the atmosphere shifted before anyone admitted why. My mother stopped raising her voice and started lowering it. She spoke in fragments now, repeating the same explanations to different people, hoping one version would stick. She said words like misunderstanding and family matter, as if repetition could turn them into truth. Evan stopped joking entirely. He spent hours on the phone, pacing, scribbling notes that didn't help. The same confidence that once filled rooms now leaked out of him slowly. He asked my father questions my father couldn't answer. He searched for shortcuts that didn't exist anymore. My father watched it all unfold with the same silence he'd always used to survive conflict. But this time, silence didn't protect him. It only made him look complicit. When someone asked why records were handled the way they were, he said he assumed everything was fine. Assumptions don't hold weight in systems that document. Ms. Jennings called once. Then again. Not to accuse. To confirm. She spoke the way professionals do when they already have the full picture and are simply closing gaps. Dates were compared. Signatures reviewed. Access logs checked. No one raised their voice. No one needed to. The truth didn't need emotion to stand. Neighbors noticed the change before explanations were offered. Missed payments. Delayed responses. Subtle signs of strain that spread quietly through reputation the way cracks spread through glass. Slow, irreversible. For the first time, blame had nowhere to land. I wasn't there to absorb it. I wasn't available to translate it. I wasn't stepping in to fix what I didn't break. When Evan finally looked at me during one of those tense, low-voiced conversations, his expression wasn't angry. It was calculating. He was still searching for leverage. He didn't find any. That night, alone, I reviewed everything one last time. The notes I'd kept. The timelines. The choices in front of me. Acting wouldn't be dramatic. Staying silent wouldn't be passive. Both were decisions. And for the first time in my life, I realized something with absolute certainty. I didn't need to explain myself anymore, not to them, not to anyone. I knew exactly what I was going to do next. Stability doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly, in small predictable things. My rent paid on time. My mornings uninterrupted. My phone staying silent unless I choose otherwise. I sleep without bracing for footsteps. I eat without calculating who might need something from me afterward. Nothing in my life is flashy now. It's solid. That's when they reach out. Not together. Never together. My mother tries first. Her message isn't an apology. It's a temperature check. She asks how I'm doing, as if we're distant acquaintances who drifted apart naturally. She mentions stress. Health. Family being important at this age. She doesn't name what happened. She never does. She just hints at forgiveness like it's a shared responsibility. I read it once. I don't respond. My father's attempt is shorter. Practical. He asks if I can come by to talk. No reason given. No acknowledgement. Just an assumption that I'll still show up when summoned, the way I always did. I don't. Evan waits longer. His message is careful. Polished. He doesn't insult me this time. He doesn't joke. He says things like we all made mistakes and it got out of hand. He frames the damage as mutual, the way people do when they're afraid of being alone with their actions. I notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say my name with warmth. He doesn't say he was wrong. He doesn't ask what I need. He asks what I'm willing to forget. That's when I finally reply. One sentence. Calm. Direct. No emotion attached. I'm not available for this conversation. There's no explosion after that. No confrontation scene. Just space. They don't know how to exist in it. I keep building my life the same way I rebuilt myself. Quietly, deliberately, without asking permission. The systems that once protected Evan now protect boundaries instead. Time does what shouting never could. Distance becomes permanent, not as punishment, but as structure. And in that structure, I finally understand something I couldn't afford to see before. Walking away wasn't betrayal. It was self-respect choosing not to negotiate anymore.